Today I'm coming to you from Southern California, dodging the raindrops in a tent to take a look at the biggest news out of Mazda practically in my lifetime. This is the all-new inline-6 powered rear-wheel drive Mazda CX-90. You've probably already seen the European cousins to this. This is the supersized model designed for the North American market. 6 seats, 7 seats, or 8 seats. Rear-wheel drive, inline-6, mild hybrid, plug-in hybrid. There's a CX-90 for everybody. Let's take a look, and if you want to know how this drives, stay tuned, because in just a few weeks, I will be driving it. Be sure and let me know what you think of the design of the CX-90 in the comment section. I'm going to roll through some extra footage of the design of the CX-90 because quarters are a little bit tight in the tent. We have a very elegantly designed front end, instantly recognizable as a Mazda, but also more modern looking with a bit more texture, more of a waterfall thing going on here with the grille lines, the LED accent strips that now cut this chrome U shape right there, and full LED headlights on the outboard side. Mazda's done LED lighting really well, I have to say, in all of their lineup, and that continues for the CX-90, where these are going to be standard. Moving around to the side, the rear-wheel drive proportions are instantly recognizable. The short overhang, the long hood design. This looks very much like you might imagine a 3-row Jaguar crossover to look, honestly. And from a lot of angles, I definitely see a little bit of Jaguar in the general profile of the vehicle. Definitely not a bad thing to be reminded of when we're talking about what is theoretically a mainstream 3-row crossover. Mazda has not been overly specific on all of the specifications. I don't know how long this is, but they have said it's longer and wider than the existing CX-9, and you can bet it's going to be a bit more expensive as well. But this is certainly going to be less expensive than pretty much anything else with an inline-6 under the hood. The one area of this design that is a little bit controversial to some of the folks I've talked to out here is the rear end, especially this 3/4 view right here, where we have this sort of rounded shape in the rear. Again, this gives me a little bit of a modern Jaguar vibe. Let me know what you think about this design down there in the comment section. I have to admit, I would have preferred something that was a bit square or a bit more chiseled in the back, because that could have improved 3rd row headroom and, of course, cargo room behind the 3rd row. And this will have a 3rd row standard. Full LED taillights in the back, just as you'd expect, including LED amber turn signals that have a really cool fade-off design to them. End model. Now, these are not the grippiest tire ever. These are Falcon all-season tires, but these are 275/45 R21s. So pretty meaty tires. If you want something that's wider than this, you're going to be taking a look at a very limited run of Hellcat Durangos, something along those lines. These are considerably meatier tires than you're going to find on a Pilot or a Highlander or anything like that. Helping keep the dimensions a little tidier, we have a bumper that does not stick out much further than the hatch. And then, of course, we have a 2-inch receiver down here because towing capacity is going to go up for the CX-90. We don't have any official specifications, but I wouldn't be surprised if this ended up somewhere around 6,000 pounds or a little bit higher, because this now has the drivetrain to support that kind of towing capability. Under the hood is where the big news happens. Now, rather unfortunately, I can't pop the hood to show you, but under here, you are going to find an all-new 3.3-liter turbocharged inline-6 engine. Until we find inline-6 engines creeping under the hood of the Grand Cherokee, this is going to be the only one in the segment with an inline-6. So expect buttery smooth power and, of course, rear-wheel drive dynamics. That's the entire reason this platform was completely redesigned. All-wheel drive will be standard, as will an 8-speed automatic transmission that was in-house designed by Mazda, but it's going to have a strong rear power bias, and logically it can probably disconnect the front wheels for better fuel economy as well. 340 horsepower is what you're going to get out of that mild hybrid standard turbocharged inline-6 engine, 369 pound-feet of torque. Now, if you want a plug, you will be able to get a plug-in hybrid variant of the CX-90 that's based around a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder engine, basically a tweaked version of the engine we've seen from Mazda for a while. That's going to drop power down to 323 horsepower, but torque stays the same at 369 pound-feet. I don't have any range figures just yet for the plug-in hybrid model, but with a battery capacity just under 18 kilowatt hours, this is probably going to be somewhere between 25 and 30 miles would be my estimate. That plug-in hybrid system uses the same 8-speed automatic transmission, but it does delete the torque converter, basically like we find in the Grand Cherokee 4xe. And the design of this all-wheel drive system is largely the same as what we find in that Grand Cherokee. So expect off-road capability, on-road capability, and mild weather capability to be not too far off of some of those luxury or premium options. Now come with me while we explore the interior together. The first thing that I noticed is we get two-way lumbar rather than four-way lumbar on the driver's side, but the seats definitely have an attractive look to them. As you'd expect in a modern vehicle, these are ventilated and heated seats. One thing I really noticed and really appreciate is this extra texture going on that center stripe on the seat bottom and seat back cushion. As we get in the interior, you'll also notice the variety of materials, attention to detail, and I think just the luxury car design that I didn't exactly expect to see in here. This interior is giving me a little bit of a perhaps Mazda meets Volvo design. We have real maple wood in this interior. It's very attractively done. Lots of high-end finishes in here, especially the fabric inserts on the doors and on the dashboard. And the stitching, if I go in really close here on the dashboard, you can see that stitching is really elegantly done. We have an injection molded upper section of the dashboard and what appears to be a very similar version of the infotainment software that we've seen from Mazda for a while. That's likely going to be my only complaint in here, is that we still have that same infotainment software. It hasn't exactly been my favorite infotainment software in the mainstream segment, but it could be that there's some extra tweaks that I'm not aware of at the moment. We have dual zone automatic climate control up front and then an additional rear climate zone there. Lots of storage going on in the center console. More of that real wood trim going on here. Here's the drive mode selector, a joystick style shifter. Under here we have 2 cup holders. Now keep in mind that storage is going to be a little bit more limited in the center console area here than some of the competition, because in a rear-wheel drive vehicle, this is where the transmission is located. However, I think that's a worthy trade-off for the driving dynamics that we're likely going to get. Here's the controller for that infotainment system, pretty similar to what we've seen in other Mazda products. Center console splits open like that to give you access to a pretty decently sized storage area for a rear-wheel drive vehicle. Again, keep in mind, transmission's under there, as well as some of the climate control components for that rear climate control zone. That appears to be where we find the USB inputs for the infotainment system. Moving back up to the dashboard, we find a full LCD instrument cluster in this top-end trim. Keep in mind, obviously, I am taking a look at one of the most expensive versions of CX-90 here. Moving out from there, we find a steering wheel with paddle shifters on the back. They're pretty discreet. They're easy to hide there behind the spokes. A revised steering wheel design, big Mazda logo there right in the center, infotainment controls, adaptive cruise control controls over there as well. And then you'll find the seat memory buttons and other controls to the left of the steering column. I've gone ahead and adjusted the front seat for me at 6 feet tall, so let's go ahead and try out the second row seats. Now the first thing I noticed back here is it doesn't appear that these seats still move in the same manner as the CX-9, where you could leave a child seat latch anchored into place, but there is plenty of room back here. You can see lots of legroom going on. Those are the controls for the rear climate control zones. We have heated and ventilated second row seats. That's definitely a nice touch. Some USB charge only ports, air vents right there in the middle. The interior quality in the back is definitely a bit of a mix of what I would assume would be luxury segment interior components and some mainstream components. Keep in mind the positioning of this. You could definitely see this as an alternative to an Acura MDX or perhaps an XC90 that might be a little bit less expensive. Moving over here to the doors, we have integrated window shades, more of that fabric and more of that maple trim going on there on the doors. Same sort of design for these second row seats. Since this is a 6-passenger version of the CX-90, we have a storage console in the middle, 2 cup holders there, same sort of bifolding armrest that we found in the front, but a deeper storage area because under here there's a drive shaft rather than the transmission, and that's probably why we have a slightly more aggressive hump right there in the middle than you'll find in some of the front-wheel drive competitors. There are always going to be pros and cons to any new car design. These are some of the realities you'll have to decide if you're shopping for the CX-90. We do find some hard plastics around this area of the console versus soft touch plastics that you might find in a luxury vehicle. However, these are going to wear a lot better than a slush molded plastic. Speaking of access to the third row, you could either go ahead and flip and fold those seats forward right like that, or if you are skinny enough, you could just slide the second row seats forward. Let's go ahead and give that a whirl. That would allow you to leave a child seat into place. And if I zoom out here, you'll notice that the door opening is fairly square. So this is definitely going to be easier to get in the back. I'm definitely able to do it than, say, the new Honda Pilot, where you could not have a child seat in place and get into the rear. So this appears to be Mazda's solution for not having that second row seat that folds in the same way. Now, if I pull this seat back, it's going to stop before the rear end of its seat travel. So let's go ahead and move over here and see how this is as far as legroom goes. Well, there's not a lot of footroom going on there, but a decent amount of legroom. This is definitely the kind of vehicle where you could be comfortable back here as long as you're a little bit shorter than me. But for a rear-wheel drive entry, headroom back here is surprisingly generous. Now, what I am surprised by is that there's not just going to be a 6-seat version of the CX-90 like I'm sitting in right now, or a 7-seat version of the CX-90 with a 3rd seat in the second row. There's apparently also going to be an 8-seat version of the CX-90. And that might be a little bit tight because that would mean adding a seatbelt right here to the middle of the 3rd row. I suspect it's doable, but I don't know exactly where that next seat belt is going to go. The seat belts obviously are in the outboard position here. We have air vents down there, and then cup holders on each side, USB charge-only ports as well. Popping open the hatch, I don't know the cargo room specifications back here, but this does look to be pretty comparable to something like the Toyota Highlander. Under the load floor, we find some additional storage area there with that plastic divider. And in case you're wondering, there is a temporary spare tire under the load floor as well. Of course, most folks are probably going to leave the third row folded most of the time. This is a manual folding third row, which is my preference. The power mechanisms, they take a little bit longer, and they always sacrifice a bit of the cargo area as well. At this point in time, I don't have any pricing or availability information on the CX-90 just yet, but you can expect that this is going to be a little bit more expensive than a Mazda CX-9 because it's much better than a Mazda CX-9. It's going to seat 7, 8, or 6 depending on the trim level you get. I don't have any details on the 8-seat version. I think it's going to be a little tight in the back. It definitely should be fine with 7 or the 6-passenger versions that we've been taking a look at obviously as well. Pricing, I wouldn't be surprised if this slotted somewhere between a Grand Cherokee L and perhaps a Toyota Highlander in terms of its pricing range. This definitely has the premium interior and premium features that you'd expect in a vehicle that cost more than the current generation CX-9. And that's been Mazda's general movement lately, has been moving their brand upmarket, maybe a slightly more value-driven alternative to an Acura or a Lexus, while also having mainstream availability, mainstream dealer networks, etc. So CX-90 is probably going to fit right there in that pricing range. I wouldn't be surprised if top-end trims exceeded $60,000 for the plug-in hybrid model. Whether or not we'll get a federal tax credit, I don't know yet, because I don't know whether the plug-in hybrid system is going to be built in the right locations with the batteries sourced from the right places to give this that federal tax credit. More of those details will probably filter out a little bit later. In the meantime, be sure and hit that subscribe button because I will be driving this in a few short weeks, so stay tuned because all of that detail is coming just as soon as possible. See all of you later.